Another episode of the Okayest Trapper podcast. As always, we are brought to you by Mountain Tough Fitness. If you are starting to put on weight for winter hibernation, now is the time to start combating that with a new fitness program. Sign up today with the promo code Okayest30. That's all caps for a free 30-day trial. And my guest today is someone who I have genuinely been looking forward to have on ever since I started this podcast. He's the owner of North American Trapper, which is both a supplier and media producer within our space. He has also been trapping since he was little, had a decade-long stint in the MLB, and is a true modern Renaissance man. Alan Probst, welcome to the show.
I appreciate it having me on.
Yeah, I know you and I have gone back and forth really since my book came out 2 years ago, and I sent you a copy. But I've been, I've been pretty excited to chat with you. And obviously, first and foremost, condolences. I know your dad passed away about a year ago, and I know that was rough. But at least from what I could see, he was a great man, and I'm looking forward to hearing some stories about him too. But in that vein, like one of the first questions I always like to ask guests is, can you remember what your first core memory of ever being exposed to trapping was?
Oh, boy, that's tough. I have 3 or 4, and I don't know which one came first, quite honestly.
Well, hit one, and then we can always hit the other two as well.
Yeah, I remember my dad caught a gray fox, and he, tapped it, laid it out of the circle. He's remaking the set, and I'm just kind of doing my thing. I don't know. I was 5, 6, maybe 7 years old. And didn't that damned gray fox get up and start running up the mountain? And my dad always carried his pistol. And if you watch any of the videos, a lot of the videos that we have, he has that little 22 trapper pistol around his waist. And I could still, see him shooting up that mountain, firing 22. He ended up getting it. So he ended up getting his gray fox. That's one. I remember.
I just got to know, I want to build the lore of your dad. How many yards was that fox away from him when he finally did hit it?
Probably, I don't know, 30 or 40. He was, I mean, it went straight up the mountain. And here in Pennsylvania, not as big as what you have out there, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, you're living in an area that it's a postcard that you go around every turn. I mean, my time in Montana and when I was out there trapping wolves back in 2020, I had the opportunity to go with Paul Ansack, and that you can't explain. And I grew up here in the Appalachians, and I spent a lot of time in the Adirondacks, and they're big mountains, but you just can't explain it unless you're out there and see what they look like. But he was running up the mountain and slinging these 22s, pop. And he ended up, finally getting it. Probably he come walking down with it. I still remember that. I remember going to a farm. It's called Welshans. Young like that too, and I was just walking, following my dad, and he's like, "No, stay back," because back then, every book that you read was you can't have any scent. And, here I sit these days, I'm touching stuff in my bare hands. I'm touching the bait and the traps and everything with the same gloves. I'm spitting around the set. Some people think my dad, to the day he passed away, he's like, "I don't know how you catch anything with what you do." It's all relative to me. It's a different mindset, different philosophy, but he'd be like, "Stay back and give me my space." And I'd watch him make his sets and stuff. And my grandfather was still alive, and he was waiting in the truck because, he wasn't going to walk up the mountain. And we come down, and I remember getting in the truck, and he's like, "Yeah, you guys should have stayed down here and set your traps over there. Red fox just ran by about a half hour ago." So that was one. And just there's a multitude of different memories that, and it can be a smell in the air. It can be a bluebird sky. It can be driving by, and all these memories come flooding back a lot.
So you mentioned that with your dad and your granddad. So was your granddad a trapper too, or was he also just tagging along when your dad was out making those sets?
No, he was a trapper. Actually, he worked for the railroad, and his father worked for the railroad. My great grandfather. I never knew my great grandfather, but my great grandfather and my grandfather supplemented their incomes with trapping and make their own lures. And when I say lures and baits, I'm talking really bare bone stuff. My dad and really me, honestly, anybody out there listening, and anybody that watches my stuff knows that I'm not just saying this. I mean, I show people how to make my mountain man bait. I
Mm.
mean, from step 1 to step 10, 12. I don't care. We're trying to get that knowledge out there to people. And if somebody wants to take what we do and promote it and sell it, I truly don't care. Or I wouldn't have put it on YouTube, or I wouldn't have put that information out there. But my father, his beaver lure was grind up his casters and mix it with mineral oil and throw in some sack oil. And that's the beaver lure that he would make. And I remember, the old Hellman's mayonnaise jars that were glass. Now they're plastic, but they used to be glass. He put his casters in there and be all ground up, mix it with mineral oil, create that paste, and pour some, not really pour, but just squeeze some of the beaver sack oil in, which you might get a half an ounce out of a good one, and mix that in. And that was his beaver lure. So, I grew up, I wouldn't say in an outdoor family because they weren't making their livings from the outdoors. My dad was a school teacher by trade, but boy, the fire of the outdoors was just created at a very young age by just no different than anybody else. A lot of times you want to be like your dad. And I really, from day one, always the outdoors, no matter what we were doing, hunting, fishing, trapping. And I lived vicariously through his, you know, emotional uh connection with nature as well. So that's really how it all started.
That's amazing. Well, and you're probably one of the rare breeds then that can say you're like from a family like of 4 generations of trappers.
Yeah.
If your great granddad were working for the railroad and trapping to supplement, and then your dad and yourself.
And it wasn't just that, my uncles, my dad's cousins. I mean, like the family we get together in the 70s, I can still remember. I can still have such a little ass. I squirt them all. I got a brand new squirt gun, and I'd squirt them with water. And my dad's uncle, who was probably 50 or 60 at the time, back then, I'm thinking he's an old man. He's probably 50. Um, and I squirted him. He said, "You squirt me one more time with that squirt gun, I'm gonna break it." And I tested the water, and I didn't have a squirt gun about 5 minutes later. But it was my uncles, my father, my grandfather, his brother-in-law, uh, my dad's cousins. We would all get together and we would boil traps at that time. And we didn't use logwood dye or anything at that time. We would literally go out and scrape the bark off of trees and boil them in bark. But I always look forward to that day when you get the whole burn pit going and you're boiling traps. And to this day, I still do that. It's the hardest process probably for trap prep because it takes the longest.
Yep.
You got to get the water, you got to get the boiling. You can't put, unless you got we do it in a half of a 55-gallon drum. You can get 4 or 5 dozen in there. Well, when you're boiling 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 dozen traps, it takes you a while because you got to do it 3 or 4 times. It's an all day thing, but I enjoy it. Actually, I'm going to be filming that. I was just thinking about that. It's getting October 2nd is getting that time. And I'll be doing that within the next week or so, showing that trap prep. But that's, really that whole atmosphere has always drawn me in.
Yeah, I feel you. I mean, obviously I didn't grow up around it, but even as an adult, like that's one of my favorite things. Even with my kids around who are extremely young, they enjoy making the fire under our big bin and
Yep.
getting the water boiling. And like you said, it's an all day affair, especially when you're, you know, going after a bunch of different critters, right? You've got
Yep.
conibears, bears, you've got footholds, you've got all sorts of stuff that you got to get
Yep.
ready to rock and roll, and it takes time, but it's a fun process. Like it's a
Yes.
painstaking process, like most of trapping, but the output and the aura and the atmosphere is
It's part of
irreplaceable.
it's part of that tradition that makes it that tradition. And in and of itself, every piece of the trap prep, every piece of the boiling, the cleaning, the setting, the catching, the fur handling, redoing the process over and over is what keeps me coming back for more.
So in the 70s, when you were a kid,
Mhm.
that was kind of like close to peak fur boom, did your dad or your uncles, did anybody go all in at one point?
Well, I'll tell you what, not all in as that statement would mean, where you quit everything and you just go trap. But my father was a school teacher, so he would get up and he'd have to be at school by 7:30 and teach till 3:30. I consider it all in, getting up at 1, 2 in the morning to go check your traps before you go to school. And then you go to school and then you go and reset where you might have had a skunk, or you go and put another couple traps in on another farm, and you come home, you skim what you got. And he wasn't catching 15, 20, 30 critters a day. There's a lot of variance that goes into that. I think the most he ever caught in 1 year was right around 30. Now that was in the heyday, 78, 79, 80. And you think everybody and their brother was out there trapping, because foxes were worth $70. Today's money, that's $300 with inflation. So could you imagine how many people would be out there trapping right now if red fox were $300 and beaver were $270, and your run of the mill possum was $42. Like in the eyes of muskrats would be literally $80 because you were getting 10, 12, sometimes upwards of $14 for a muskrat. Hell, a male mink was bringing you $40 back then. So I would consider it all in, because you're basically, your whole day is revolved around that. And my uncles worked at the steel mill. They worked second shift, 3 to 11. So they were up and at 'em before daylight, going, checking, and I think there's a really good picture. I don't know. I'm sure it's on Facebook at some place on my page where I've reminisced or talked about my grandfather, but my grandfather's standing in front of the house with all of the foxes beside him from all three of the brothers, my dad and his two younger brothers. And it's a really cool picture. And I think combined they had over 100 that year. And really, when you think about it, that's pretty good, because everybody and their brother was out there. Trap theft was high. Getting permission was almost non-existent unless you owned it or knew somebody. Even if you then caught a fox, if somebody saw one bouncing, they were coming over and grabbing it. Imagine catching a coon today, which back then was $50. That's $150 coon today or whatever. Could you imagine, you're setting a farm and you got 6 DPs lined up and you got 3 coons? It's 450 or $450. If a hunter comes by there, those coons aren't going to be there. They're going to take those. So it was a different game. You could argue it's better. You could argue it's worse. You could go to today and say it's better today. I hear a lot of people that really, use that value, the monetary value of the critter, as a reason to trap or not to trap. That's not why I trap. I haven't sold a raw fur, skinned and dried and to market in probably over a decade. My dad still did enjoy that process. He would go to the fur sales, but I've gotten everything tanned. They make great gifts.
Yeah.
The value of it to me is not a monetary thing at this point. Although, we all need to eat and, all those sayings, but at the end of the day, anybody who wants to trap today can go out and catch quite a few critters. And if you had pricing structures that were in the late 70s, early 80s, or even if you want to go back and just recently, 10 years ago, 2012, 13, 14, when we had a pretty good coon market, which kind of drives everything, there'd be a lot more guys out there and there'd be a lot less fur in each and every person's traps, depending.
Yeah. I guess that's a good lens to look at it through, because, I think, especially as someone like myself who came in later in life, right? Like, yeah, it'd be really great if I could live off of trapping, but it's a very hard thing to do. And you think about, and you talk to people who lived through the fur boom, they're like, oh yeah, I was getting X amount of dollars per coon, muskrat, everything you just said. You're like, man, that'd be really great if it were that way today. But one of the benefits I have, I've never had anybody that I bumped into on any of my lines.
Yep.
Yeah, there's just not as many people out there doing it. And, thankfully I'm not having to be monetarily driven, more so for, the things we talked about, the nostalgia, the being able to make gifts and use the animal, eat the meat, all that good stuff. But yeah, that's a good way to look at it, that maybe grass isn't always greener on the other side.
It's not. There's positives and negatives to both of those structures. From a business standpoint, high prices would be great for North American Trapper.
Yep.
But that's not really what our philosophy and my company's built on. My company's built on getting new people involved: hunters, farmers, ranchers, homeowners, people that want to get involved. We're there to try and teach and offer them, not the bare minimum, but we don't. I'm not a full supply dealer. If you go to my website, I don't carry everything. I don't carry, you know, extra pans and springs and all these different things. I really only carry what I use. And that's my philosophy with how I'm running North American Trapper. But there's plus and minuses to both of those.
Yeah. Well, before we get on the North American Trapper, I just want to keep following this line because it's really interesting to me. So you're growing up around your granddad, great granddad. Eventually, you go to school at some point.
Mm-hmm.
You clearly find out you can swing a bat and catch a ball pretty good. Like, what was your life with trapping as you went through high school and probably made the decision in college to, play ball and ultimately play professionally?
I'll try and make it quick. My first year I could get a driver's license, my goal was catch 100 muskrats. Now, I don't know if you could go catch 100 muskrats in Pennsylvania now because there's muskrat. You just can't find muskrats like that anymore. But my goal in 1985 was to go catch 100 muskrats. And I would take my mom's Ford Escort hatchback and go out. And if there was any rat sign, it'd be 20 miles away and I see one dropping. I go back there to catch that one rat. And I ended up catching, I can't remember the exact number, 111, 113, 117. I caught over 100, but it was right in that one teens. And, I did that. Always trapped. Couldn't trap beaver till you're 12. You had to have a hunting license. So, it was a progression. Almost got kicked out of the dorm in college because I trapped through college. I went to Mansfield University in northern Pennsylvania, just north stomping grounds from where I live here and where we trapped beaver when I was 12. I go out and catch muskrats and mink and stuff. I bring them back to the dorm room, skin them in the dorm room. And the RA was like, dude, you can't do that here. And, I had to end up going and see the person in charge. And, but in the following year, I was living off campus, which was much better for that. But
before we move from that, I got to ask, did you have a roommate when you were?
Yeah, I had three. We lived in a suite. It was called Cedar Crest, and I was on the baseball team. So I had one room, and then we had a middle room. Well, in the middle room, I strung up. I was using. I think I actually was using shoelaces to tie the muskrat legs, and that's where I was doing my skinning. Now I just skin them on my leg, but at that time, I put newspaper down or whatever I could find, and the blood's dripping. And
who ratted you out? Was it one of your roommates?
That's the thing. I didn't even really think about it. It was so normal to me. We had our door open, and people were just like, "What are you doing?" Oh my god, it was just crazy. And my buddies still get on me about that. They're like, "Dude, you're a redneck," and I'm like, "Yeah, all right, it is what it is." But I went to Mansfield. I took biochemistry with a concentration in fisheries science, but I also went to Mansfield. I really majored in baseball. I mean, growing up, my people would ask me when I was 12 years old, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, I want to play baseball. I want to play. And they're like, oh, yeah, good luck, buddy. And this guy's out of his mind. I grew up in a town with 1,000 people. And, I had opportunities to go to Penn State. I had opportunities to go to some D1 schools, and I didn't really feel not comfortable. That's not the word. I didn't feel like it was the right fit for me for baseball. And Mansfield was a pretty good perennial powerhouse in Division II. And they had a wall. We went to visit my senior year of high school. And they had their dugout wall. And they had every year and the name of the person that got drafted and who they got drafted by. And I was like, I want my name on that wall. And 3 years later, my junior year, I got drafted by the Astros and was fortunate to get 10 years in the Astros, Blue Jays, and Mets organizations.
Okay, now please tell me that at some point in your professional baseball career, you were skinning an animal in the dugout or something,
No,
locker room or anything.
no, but we did do a lot of outdoor things. Like when I can still remember in Asheville, North Carolina, I love to trout fish. And in Asheville, North Carolina, there was an older gentleman had season tickets, and he found out that I like to fish, and I went fishing with this guy like almost every morning when we were home and not on the road. We'd go over to Rocky Mount State Park, which is where they filmed The Last of the Mohicans, right there outside of Asheville, and just yank the trout out of those really beautiful streams. There was down in New Orleans, we would go out, and I was living in Orange, and they got nutria everywhere. Like in the moonlight, we would stop and watch the nutria swim up these little ditches. So I was always keeping it close. And then I off season, I lived in Orlando, Florida. Actually lived in Orlando for about 7 years. And every off season, though, I would make it a point to come up before Thanksgiving. I would trap for a week with my dad and do that. And then deer season always come in the Monday after Thanksgiving here in Pennsylvania. Now it comes in the Saturday after, but it would always come in that Monday after. And I would stay and hunt a couple of days of deer. So I was here a week and a half getting that. I used to call it my outdoor fix. And then I'd go back to the concrete jungle down in Disneyland. But I think all those years I might have only missed 1 or 2 where I did not come back and get out there and do that trapping. And Thanksgiving Day used to be my favorite day of the year. Still is my favorite day of the year. One, it's the best food. It's football. You're zonked out by 3 o'clock on the chair. But Thanksgiving Day was the first day of muskrat and mink when I was growing up. Now it comes on in the Saturday before, I believe. But that was the first day of muskrat and mink. So Thanksgiving Day was always like my holiday. I just felt like this is my day. And we would go out, set all day, making muskrat traps. And like it wouldn't be dark for 2 hours. And we were going and checking them because you go check them, take it out, put it back in. You end up catching 2 in the same trap over the night. And if we were in a really hot spot that we were worried about, theft or anything like that, you go check them at 8 p.m. to go check them at midnight, and then you go back and check them in the morning. So Thanksgiving Day was always really cool. And like I said, I would always come back every year to get that outdoor fix.
Did you ever meet any other players who had a trapping background?
Boy, trapping, not very many.
Yeah.
I don't. The only one I can think of, well, the first person that comes to mind is a guy named Russ Johnson. He went to LSU. He played in the big leagues a little bit with the Astros, and I don't know if he got up with I think he got up with the Yankees too. Later, maybe late 90s, early 2000s, but he was a hunting guru. He like I remember when we were in big league camp with the Astros, and you had in that locker room, you had Jeff Bagwell, Craig Biggio, Moises Alou, Derek Bell, Killer Bees, Mike Hampton, Darryl Kyle, all these guys. And Russ, the turkey season comes in during spring training down there in Osceola, the Osceola turkey. And we were staying in Kissimmee, that's in the middle of that. And he went out and he'd go out there and whack birds and bring them in the locker room and hang them up. And it was just funny. They'd be like, dude, there's something wrong with you. And he'd be skinning, they were like, whoa. But trapping wise, I just can't remember anybody that I can think of that had that fix. A lot of guys that fish, a fair amount that would hunt, but trapping, that was
Yeah, you were the lone ranger representing that group, huh?
Really what's funny is I do know a baseball guy, that Scott Ramsey out of Idaho or Washington. I can't remember. One day he's in Washington, and he travels so much, and he's in Idaho, but he's in Washington out there. Scott, and he's a big time wolf trapper. I don't know if you know who Scott is.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Scott is the only other. He's the only one that I could say is a friend of mine that I know who is in baseball and actually traps.
See, I didn't realize he was in baseball. So
Oh yeah, he's been a scout for. We actually, it was funny. He came over when we were trapping wolves in Montana and rode. We rode. He actually did the driving. He rode with us for like a week, and he actually scouted me and remembers writing a report as a way scout on me, which was kind of funny in our travels. But Scott's the only one that I know of that has that baseball correlation or connection.
So your baseball career comes to an end. Who were you playing for when you left?
No, the Mets. I spent my last 2 years with the Mets.
Okay.
Yep.
And when you left, what was that like? Did you come home to Pennsylvania? Like, what was the?
I went back and I was living in Orlando. I started, believe it or not, I started an eBay business. I was buying because I had been doing some eBay on the side. I've always been entrepreneurial, always. Always like, I had a paper route when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. I was always had that entrepreneurial spirit. I got done with baseball. My body broke down in 2001. My agent was like, yeah, I'm having trouble. And by early 2002, I had realized I'm pretty much done. So, well, when you've been in baseball that long, you kind of put your retirement on the waiver, the wire, they call it. And within like a month, I had 3 coaching offers, like managerial coaching offers with the Astros, the Mets, and the Cardinals. And I just was baseballed out. I'd given 25, basically 20, 25 years of my life at that point, committed to doing what I did. And I just was like, you know what? I need a break. And I started buying distressed merchandise by the tractor trailer load from Academy Sports, which is mostly out in Texas and the South region there. And it would be anything, basically you buy a tractor trailer load, it's 24 pallets. And each pallet's going to be returns. Well, the thing is, if somebody buys something at Walmart, whether it's a TV or whatever, and they return it, Walmart can't put that back on the shelf, even if it's unopened, because it's considered distressed merchandise. So that merchandise goes to a center and then they sell it for pennies on the dollar. Well, I was buying a full load, but I believe the place was called Countryside Closeouts or Countrywide Closeouts out of St. Louis or whatever. And I would get that in. It would take me about a month to go through. I could do about a pallet a day, which was sometimes 30 items, sometimes 40 items. It might be basketballs. It might be a dumbbell. It might be anything. It might be some fishing lures. You just didn't know. It was whatever returns were. And
so you just bought the container essentially blindly.
24 pallets. 24 pallets would show up on a truck. We'd take them off. They were all shrink wrapped. And then one by one, I'd start opening up the pallets and I'd do one pallet. And I had, at any point in time, I would have anywhere 500, 750, 1,000 auctions going on eBay at one particular time. And I did all right. I did well. But boy, I was burning myself out. I was one man wrecking crew working. I had a warehouse, a little rinky dink place, 4,000, 5,000 square feet. And it just turned into a lot. And then the NRA convention was at the Orange County Convention Center in May of 2003. And I went to it and I walked around and the outdoor channel was there. They were the only game in town. I said, I'd love to do a trapping show because me and my buddy, Mark Corey, who was my roommate when I was with the Mets, he was from Pennsylvania and he hunted, and we used to go to Walmart and buy the videos and watch the ultimate incomplete deer hunter with Jeff Foxworthy, and then all the truth videos, the monster buck videos. We had every video and we would watch them every night after the games. And with that, I walked up and I said, I'd love to do a trapping show. And they're like, oh, that would be great. Nobody's ever done a trapping show. I think it would do really well on the networks or whatever. And I called my father that night and said, I'm coming back to Pennsylvania. I made the decision that quick. I'm coming back.
Really?
And he said, well, yeah, well, he thought I was just coming up to visit. He's like, yeah, what are you coming up for? And I said, well, I'm moving back, Dad. And he's like, well, what are you going to do for work? I said, I'm going to do outdoor videos. And he said, I can still remember him saying this. He's probably sitting in that chair right there. How the hell are you going to make money doing outdoor videos? And I said, I've got no idea. I'll figure it out. Over the next 2, 3 months, I found out the best prosumer camera, which was the Canon XL1S. That was actually being used to make movies at the time, but it was something that you could somewhat afford. They were about 8 grand, 9 grand. And I, I think I moved back in middle of August, and I was back in Pennsylvania and started filming that fall.
So when you were at the NRA show and met the Outdoor Channel folks, said, want to do this show. They're like, yep, let's rock it out. Did you cut and run
Oh, no,
from?
it didn't go like that. That would have been
Oh.
really nice. I realized after I got home and drove all the way to Minnesota to meet with Gander Mountain about being a sponsor for the TV show and this idea that I had, because that's what it was. It was an idea. And I was green. I was gung ho. Like pretty much everything I do, I'm gung ho. I either pull the trigger or I don't. It's not a lot of thought. It's a normal gut reaction. Yeah, I can do it. Nah, don't like it. And I stick with my gut, and it doesn't fail me usually. But it took until I got my first TV show on the air in 2005, March of 2005 in Pennsylvania. It was a local show. It was a hunting, fishing, trapping show. We did everything. It's called All Outdoors with Alan Probst. And to this day, a lot of people still say, oh, I miss your TV show, because it ran from 05 to about 19.
Oh, wow.
So I started when I said, you know what, I'm just going to concentrate on my passion, North American Trapper. But that ran locally. Well, I had reached out. Duke has always been a massive supporter. And I really wouldn't be where I'm at today without, them taking an opportunity on just a young gung ho kid looking to do this. And, they'll always have my loyalty. As time went on, I just trying to get other sponsors and stuff. And I reached out to F&T, and they said, no, we're not really interested in sponsoring that. We're not really probably going to do that. But if you ever do a trapping show, we'll be happy to, talk to you. And I was like, well, I've always wanted to do a trapping show. And that started the North American Trapper, which started in 2010. It was called F&T's North American Trapper. For the first 3 years, it ran under my brand. And I lost a lot of money doing that, because the amount of money that's needed to run a TV show, and it doesn't matter if you're some peon like me or Ted Nugent or whoever, we all pay our airtime. Yep. I think a lot of people think that we're getting paid by the network. We're not. They don't pay us anything. We pay them. And it's tens of thousands of dollars to run these TV shows. So you have to get sponsors, or you have to sell product, and you have to do all these different things to do that. And F&T allowed me to get that start, but I couldn't find anybody else. There's just no real money in the trapping industry that is disposable like that. It's not like the hunting industry. Some of them big companies, they have money and big budgets. Trapping, we just don't have big budgets, especially if the market's not good.
Yeah.
But the first 3 years it ran under North American Trapper, and then they reached out and said, hey, you're going to do the show again. And I'm like, I really would. And they said, well, if you produce it, we'll take over the executive duties. And we'll give you who we want filmed. And for the last 7 years it ran F&T's, they changed the name. It was F&T's Freedom Outdoors. So then I produced it, and basically they brought in who they wanted on the shows, and that's when people started seeing Gary Schumann and Liesl Roussod and Jeff Dunlap and all the people that they promoted, that they were doing the executive part of it. I was just basically going, filming, producing, editing, and then putting the final product, getting taken care of those behind the scenes. And as time went on, I was just like, I nothing with them. There was no problems there. There wasn't a big falling out. It was just, I'm not feeling fulfilled. I'm 50 years old. I've always had this passion. I brought my first catalog out in 2006, 2007, and I had my first website, North American Trapper. People tend to forget that North American Trapper had a website in 2003.
Uh-huh.
And, I just didn't understand how to do things correctly at that time. And some of that's my fault. Some of that's maybe misconceptions, preconceived notions of what I was, trying to do. But ultimately, the whole thing has transpired to where we're at now, and I'm happy where we're at now. We're doing good things. We're introducing new people into it, which is, I think anybody that can help bring more people into trapping is going to strengthen the ranks. And the biggest thing is debunking all of those lies and half truths to where they don't, people that don't understand why we do what we do can't get to that point that we're really out there doing, which is to create the overall health of the species. I mean, I guarantee you that I know I do, and I guarantee you a lot of people, you included, love animals way more than the antis in a
Yep.
lot of instances. And moving forward, we're just going to keep that vision.
Well, I love that. And I got to ask, so you've kind of come full circle where you kind of started in an e-commerce capacity, and now with our North American Trapper, you're also on the e-commerce side. But in that trajectory of e-com to content creation to e-com, like what was the hardest learning curve for you? Was it operating cameras on a trap line and working with people that F&T were putting up for you to go film with? Was it the production, like the actual sitting at your computer and, slicing together? Yeah, because it doesn't sound like that was in your wheelhouse coming out of a decade-long career in MLB. So, like, what was the hardest part of all of that?
It actually was an easy transition for me because I critiqued the videos that were actually already on the market. And the two things that my productions had to have, which is the reason why I researched the best cameras, they had to have good sound quality and they had to have good picture quality. I didn't care if somebody bought a production that I put out and disagreed or didn't like me or disagreed with what I'm saying. Well, he doesn't know me. I don't care about that. But the one thing that mattered to me was that they could not say anything about the production quality. They could not say anything about the sound, and they could not say anything about the videoing. The videoing was not going to be I call it the trombone zoom. Zoom in, zoom out, zoom in. That just used to boggle my mind. And then the full zoom to where it's everything's on the screen like that, like stay back, let people see the whole field of view. I just had little things in my mind that to me were not anything other than just common sense. So the video and really wasn't hard because I didn't really make it harder on myself. I tried to do it like simple, do it simplistic. The hardest part for me, quite honestly, is the financial responsibility of putting the content out.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, Duke has been a big. I couldn't do the North American Trapper show right now if it wasn't for Duke being part of it. We're talking. It's the numbers are big, and anybody can find this. I'm not. You can fact check me all you want, but it's a couple $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
Just to run a show 6 months. You start adding in license. I think I spent $2,600 last year on licenses. you got to start adding in the travel. You start adding in the wear and tear on your vehicle. You start adding in the hotels because I'm not sleeping in a tent under my truck. I'm too old. My body hurts too much. I'm getting a hotel room. I'm going to Minktoberfest tomorrow morning. I'm not sleeping at the camp.
Yep.
I'm going to enjoy the camp and then I'm going to go to the hotel and then I'll be back the next morning. That's not me. But the hardest part has been the financial uh opportunities that, just as I said in the trapping, like when I ran my hunting TV show, I had some really big sponsors. That was a lot easier for me. When I was running Wild Pennsylvania on the national networks, Sportsman Channel, Pursuit Channel, I had Excalibur crossbows, Tink 69, America's number one buck lure, Swarovski optic, Hunter safety system. I had some, big players in the industry, Walker's Game Ear, all of those, and those sponsorships, gave me a chance to breathe. But with the trapping stuff, it's been a rite of passion. It's just been passion that has carried me forward. And I feel like I'm always robbing Peter to pay Paul, but that's all right. I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm making ends meet.
And with that, you mentioned a little bit, like, I'm curious your perspective from a multi-generational trapping family. Like, what's your crystal ball vision for the future of trapping? You talked a little bit about the vision for North American trapper being to get new people in. Obviously, when I came in as a new trapper 6 years ago, I looked you guys up because I was trying to pine for anything that gave me information. But what's your crystal ball say, and what do we have to do as a community to keep it moving forward? And for anybody listening, you could see Alan's face just grimace, which is kind of a normal reaction.
You're asking me a question that I have to answer, and I'm sure it's going to piss some people off. It just is what it is. We are our own worst enemy. That's the answer to the question. The answer to that question is that we as trappers are our own worst enemy. The best way to get an argument is just type on Facebook, Duke 550 versus MB 550, and you're going to have 1,000 people in there fighting amongst ourselves. I don't care what somebody uses. Yes, I promote Dukes. I don't care if somebody else uses Dukes. We want you to use Dukes because that pays some bills, and that's fine. But if you want to use an MB, or you want to use an old Montgomery, or you want to use an old Victor, I don't care. I have people that do things for me that promote my baits and lures, promote North American Trapper, and I have an ambassadorship that I've started where I have a couple people that have come in as an ambassador. My number one thing is just don't lie. Be honest. If you go and catch something in a set and you caught it with Mountain Man or you caught it with Coonbuster, promote that. But don't ever say that you caught an animal with our bait if you didn't. I just want honesty. But with what we are as a whole, which is the lowest hanging fruit on the outdoor tree, we're down there with dog hunters, and then you got the deer hunter. We're at the bottom. We're the first. We're going to take the brunt of a lot of what's going on. Look at the wolves. Look at New Mexico. Look at California. Look at Massachusetts.
Colorado.
Look at all of these states, and we are the low hanging fruit. So the worst thing we can do as a community is to continue to argue back and forth over the most mundane things that have no bearing on the tradition or no bearing on the outcome as we move forward. So that's the easiest way to answer it. Get out of our own way as a community. Everybody should be happy for everybody. Man, you caught that. Awesome. I love seeing, listen to me. I love seeing the barn pictures at the end of the year. I haven't ever caught enough fur I've caught last year. I caught probably a couple hundred pelts, but I don't have the time to do that. And really, I look at them barn pictures like, wow, I don't look like that guy's the best trapper in the world. I look like, man, look at the amount of work that guy had to put in. And I'm thinking, I don't even think about the skinning and stuff. I'm thinking about just pounding the damn nails in to hang him up. Like that's a passion. That's a rite of passion for that guy. I got no problem with that person doing that. And then, but you'll see somebody, oh, he's in an area where they have more. Well, yeah, of course he is. That's how he's able to catch that many. You're not going to catch 300 coyotes in Pennsylvania. You're not going to catch 300 possums in South Dakota. You know why? They don't have possums. So you have to look at all that. And I think if we can get the egos out of the way, let the egos just, you're a trapper, dude. You don't see bikers going to biker bars usually like, you're a biker. They're all going down the road. Even Jeep owners thumbing out the window. Everybody that's got a Jeep, they all are like a little community. They have that common bond. The trapping community, it's like we should have that common bond, but we don't. And I don't know why that is. And I've tried, to hopefully be a positive in that type of an approach. But in essence, I think we just need to get out of our own way and stop arguing and start doing what's beneficial for the tradition.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, I've been at the brunt of that a few times already too, with some of the infighting, and it doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about how small we are and how actively we're being attacked and losing. Frankly, when you look at New Mexico, Colorado,
you can't win if you got 10 guys on an MMA team and you got another 10 guys on an MMA team, and you take those 10 against those 10, but this 10 has 5 of them fighting against the other 5. How are they going to beat the 10? It's simple. It cannot be done. You have to unite. And our numbers are skewed. I live in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's numbers are skewed. Yeah, it'll say, I don't know what the exact number is, but I think the NTA came out and said there was 160 or 170,000 trapping licenses sold last year. Dude, I know in Pennsylvania, you have to buy a fur taker license if you just want to hunt fox. And I know that a large percentage of our licenses sold are people that are just hunting predators. They're not trapping. So the numbers are actually lower than what are being promoted. And that's not a knock on the NTA. That's just the number of licenses that have been sold. I think they're the ones I saw the number at. But in essence, our numbers aren't even that high because a lot of these states have to buy a fur bearer license to go out and hunt fox or predators. So you're right. Our community is small, and we need to band together to hopefully fight those threats that seem to be almost on a daily basis. Hunter Nation. I don't know if you've heard of Hunter Nation or what they're doing, but they're on top of things. They're a really good organization that is doing a lot for trappers behind the scenes and getting a lot of that information out there. I know the wolf is a big part of that process with them right now, especially the Wisconsin situation, which is, it's insane. I had a guy email me here when I put a video on about something. He emailed me. He's like, yeah, I let more wolves go than I catch coyotes now. I mean, it's a serious problem. But Hunter Nation, anybody out there that is looking for some good information, Hunter Nation is definitely a good source.
Yeah, I know. I follow them, and they do have put out a lot of great stuff. Man, we're about a quarter of the way through the amount of questions I had for you, Alan.
We're already out of time.
We're not quite out of time, but I want to hit a few high points before we do run out of time, though. Right. So we'll have to do a part 2, no, for sure, if you're up for it. But
I'll help you out whatever you need.
Super. Well, on that thread of like bolstering our ranks, right? Like part of that is attracting new trappers. And as someone who got into trapping in my 30s, like it can be daunting. Because the reception in trapping, unless you know somebody, have a mentor, it's a very hard thing to break through. Mm-hmm. What's your advice for people who are now like looking on the outside saying, maybe that's something I do want to try? And I'm seeding that a little bit because I know with North American Trapper, you guys sell packages to help people who are trying to get off the ground. But like, what advice would you give to people who are, looking at it, maybe nervous to get into it and don't really know where to start?
Very simply, there's a lot of good information out there. We have that beginner series that we've done on YouTube, the North American Trapper Beginner Series, and then we touch on more advanced. But there's not anything that we put out that is advanced, like, because I don't think it really needs to be. For somebody just starting out, I would fully recommend just grabbing a couple DPs, getting your feet wet, catching some raccoons and some dog proofs. It's very simple to set. A 5-year-old can do it with a setter. But catch a few coons, uh, get your feet wet, see if it's something that you do want to pursue, and then move up from there. Then you maybe pick up a couple 550s or pick up a couple 1.5s, or and then start to add to that. People ask me all the time, where's the best way I can learn something? Where's the best way I can learn something? And I, to this day, will stand by this. The best way to learn something is on your own. You will learn so much more out in the field than you'll ever learn from watching a DVD, YouTube, or a book. You will learn everything. It'll make you, not only will trapping make you obviously a better trapper, but you're going to be a better understander of animal habits. You're going to be a better hunter. It'll actually make you a better fisherman. You start to look at stream bed. Like every stream I trout fish, I'm like, oh, that's a good mink set right there under that root. I may be working a mini and I'm over here looking at, I'm not even looking at the mini. I'm looking at a root system thinking, boy, that's a good mink set. So you're going to start to things are going to jump out at you. But trapping as a whole, you're going to get you're going to be way more information from your own mistakes and learning as you go forward. That in and of itself is where you're going to get it. In the meantime, get started, get yourself a couple dog proofs. Like you said, we have the kits. The hunter kit's got 2 dog proofs in it. The rancher kit's got 2 550s in it. The hunter set up to go out and catch raccoons. The rancher kit's just to get your feet wet. They're under $100. They're $99, and we give them a bait, a lure, 2 stakes, 2 S hooks, 2 traps, the logwood dye to boil them, and a pair of gloves, and a driver for your stakes. But we don't inundate them with stuff they don't need. And for $99, they can go try it and find out if that's what they want. And hopefully we have a customer for life. Hopefully they want to be a trapper for life. But getting your feet wet is the biggest thing. And the second thing that goes along with that, don't be scared. Don't listen to the people that tell you it's so hard. No, it's not hard. It's an animal. You're a human. You can do this. Go out, do a couple things simple, and you're going to go back the next day and you're like, holy hell, I caught one.
And it's an awesome feeling. And for those, you described my foray into trapping, which you read in the book. It was all just me trial and error.
Yeah.
So it's
my dad he's like, dude, that guy's crazy. I think I told you that one time. He read the book before he gave it, because I bought it for him because he likes to read. And he read the book and he's like, dude, that's a good book. You got to read that, man. That guy's nuts. That guy's nuts.
Yeah, well, I wish I was around to admit
he loved it. He gave it a thumbs up, and I know that I posted that on Facebook at some point, probably a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, to where my dad said this guy's nuts, and I highly recommend this book.
Well, that's awesome. Well, okay, with winding time, we're going to do a lightning round. The 2 questions I always ask people before they go.
I guess I should have watched all your shows and seen what everybody else answered.
No, this is even better. So, what's the wildest thing you've ever experienced in the woods in all of your travels, trapping, hunting?
Oh my God, dude, there's a lot.
Yeah, pick one.
The one real quick is I'll give you one hunting, one trapping. Hunt moose in Maine, and a moose almost ran me over, and I shot it. It was 4 feet in front of me, coming at me. So that's that. That was like,
wow. That's a change your pants situation.
Yep. And then the second thing was I was young. I don't even think I was old enough to drive. I think my girlfriend drove me there. and I was setting muskrat traps, and I was putting the 110 down in the hole in the pond, and the muskrat came out and got caught in the trap when I was holding the trap in my hand. So that was kind of cool. I mean, there's so many, but those two are the first two that pop.
So you can say that you've caught a muskrat by hand.
Well, I didn't catch it by hand. I was holding the trap that caught it.
I don't know. It's attached to. I'd be claiming that one if I were.
Well, that scared you. Want to tell you? I don't know if I was more scared of the moose or when that happened.
Yeah, well, you probably weren't. Well, you knew the moose was coming. You didn't know that muskrat was about to swim out.
The thing was, I caught the muskrat and I pulled it out, and two more went flying out the hole. So I reset two traps and came back and had two rats going into the hole. There was only three in there. I left them there for 2 more days. I got 3 rats and had them all within about 2 hours.
That's awesome. All right, so last one. I always end on a hypothetical. So would you rather relive your time in the MLB, but once that 10-year frame was up and you're back in your current age, you can't trap for the rest of your life? Or would you rather just have the physical capacity to keep trapping until you're 90?
Oh, the trapping wins hand down.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing that I wouldn't two things. The only 2 things that I wouldn't give up, I saw something online. I actually sent it to my sister. It said, if you were able to reincarnate yourself and come back and you were able to choose your father, who would you? I would always choose my dad. He would win hands down every time. He would always be chosen as my dad. And the second thing is my son. They're the only 2 things that would keep me away from getting out there and experiencing. Nature is I know a lot of people talk, and I'll say this with tongue in cheek because I'm honest that way. I was born in the wrong century. Like, I want to be in the 1815, 1820, 1825, 1830, the Beaver Wars. I mentally want to be there and go through that. I don't want to deal with what they dealt with, though. So I'm cool with having a shower and a toilet and all of that. But when it comes to the outdoors, nature, and trapping, by far and away, I love to hunt and I love to fish. But trapping is that one-on-one with the critter, that walking up a stream bank with a number 2 Victor, because I still use my dad's number 2 Victors, which is a fantastic mink trap. I still think there's nothing more special than walking up that creek and looking at where a little bank comes out and there's a root or whatever. You know what? A mink's going to run right there, and you just set your trap right where he's going to come out or right where he's going in. And you go back the next day with no lure, no bait, no nothing, and there's a mink in the water. That, to me, that one-on-one with nature, putting yourself in with that animal, can't be touched by anything in the outdoors. But
I agree.
Yeah, that in and of itself, and the memories, like, I think of my dad every day. I think of him constantly. And like behind me, you can see the bears on the wall. These are bears that I filmed him shooting. And you ever see the bobcat he caught?
I don't think so.
Like a little kid. That's the bobcat, that 33-pounder
wow,
that he caught in that cable. That was probably, no, not probably, by far the best thing I've ever filmed in my life. His reaction, when it's a cat. That can't take that away. I'm very fortunate to have those memories on film to go back to. But yeah, that's a long-winded approach to answering your question, but hands down, travel.
Yeah, it's a time machine. It's a memory machine. It's a great pursuit for those listening. But for those listening, where can people learn more about you, North American Trapper? What shows you've got going on now? Where are you going to be coming up? Obviously, Minktoberfest.
Yeah, we're going to go out there. Everything that we do is North American Trapper. You can find us on Facebook, North American Trapper, YouTube, North American Trapper TV. The North American Trapper TV show airs tonight. Our first show of the year airs at 10 p.m. on Wednesdays. We're going to run for the next 13 weeks. This probably won't run, today, but every Wednesday we run at 10 p.m. And our website is NorthAmericanTrapper.com. If anybody needs anything, we'll be more than happy to help you out. And whether you buy something or not, if you have any questions, send us a question. It may take me a day or two, depending where I'm at, to get back to you. But I personally respond to every email, and I will try and put anybody out there in the right direction to your own path on the trap line.
That's awesome, Alan. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I've learned a lot. I appreciated your support over the years. And for everybody listening, we'll catch you on another episode of the Okayest Trapper podcast.